All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome to the producer-led webinar series, Planting New Ideas, Growing Conservation. I'm Dana Crystal, Conservation Specialist with DATCAP. I'm stepping in for Rachel Rushman today. For today's webinar, we are fortunate to be joined by folks from Practical Farmers of Iowa, UW Extension, as well as from the Lafayette Ag Stewardship Alliance. We'll be sharing insights and experiences about delivering field days, workshops, and other events using virtual platforms. Before we dive into that content, I want to first make an announcement regarding the 2021 request for proposals for DATCAP's Producer-Led Watershed Protection Grant Program. So the RFP and application materials will be released within the next week. And something new for this year is that applicants will be divided into two different evaluation pools, depending upon how many years they have received funding. So groups who are new or have received funding for less than 2 years will be evaluated using slightly different criteria than those who have received funding for 2 or more years. So the RFP and applications will outline those in greater detail, and we'll post those to the website, and a notification will be sent out by the listserv as well. Lastly, I just want to mention that applications this year will be due September 21st. So again, keep an eye out for that information, and don't hesitate to reach out to either Rachel Rushman, the program manager, or myself with any questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Erica Olson.
Great, thanks Dana, and thanks everyone for joining today and being part of this webinar series. We're on our 5th webinar, part of the producer-led webinar series, Planting New Ideas, Growing Conservation. The last 4, we've featured farmers and talked about specific agronomic practices and kind of dove deep into some logistical things of their conservation efforts. We thought this month we would change it up a little bit and talk a little bit about hosting alternative events since it seems as though we're to a point where we gotta figure out how to move forward with education and outreach for our producer-led groups and programming. So we wanted to provide you all with some tools and insights into creative ways to still share your work and connect with others through your producer-led groups and have events. So my name is Erica Olson, and I work for the Discovery Farms program, and we have been happy to partner with DATCAP and some other extension folks to put together this webinar series. The Discovery Farms program is an extension program that focuses on the relationship between agriculture and water quality through research throughout the state of Wisconsin on privately owned farms. On today's agenda, we're going to be interviewing Maggie Norton, who is the Farmer Outreach Coordinator from Practical Farmers of Iowa. And we'll also hear from Josh Kamps, who is a member of the Lafayette Ag Stewardship Alliance and also the Lafayette County Division of Extension Ag Educator. And we will also hear from Whitney Prestby, who's also with UW Division of Extension in the Natural Resources. So without further ado, I will welcome Maggie to the screen. And Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa and your work with the organization?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for having me on today. So I work for Practical Farmers of Iowa, and we're a farmer-led organization based in Iowa. Our membership is really diverse, and our mission is to equip farmers to be more resilient. My role as the Farmer Outreach Coordinator is to identify people with stories and then get them out there and exposed and put into media opportunities and speaking opportunities at different conferences to try and share all the great work that our members are doing. Why I'm here today is because one of the roles of my job is to put on a Farminar series. So it's a webinar series that occurs during the winter months, and it's once a week through the winter. And we have different farmers farmers or like conservation or ag related stakeholders come on and share. And that farm in our series was wrapping up. We do it on Zoom, and that was wrapping up just as the pandemic was starting. And so because I was, had experience putting together an event on Zoom, it was a natural fit for me to slide into how to figure out how to put our events online with our upcoming field day season at that point in time. So I quickly became the staff expert on virtual field days, and I've been spending a lot of time doing Q&A like this to share what our experience was like and what we've learned.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here with us today, Maggie. One thing I forgot to mention, we're going to try to make this pretty interactive. So if you do have questions, please type them in the chat as we go throughout this webinar today, and we'll make sure to get to those throughout. And Maggie, what types of events have you transitioned to a virtual platform? You kind of touched on that a little bit, but.
Yeah, so we were gearing up for all of our field day events just as the pandemic was starting. So that was the biggest challenge was, late spring, summer, and fall is definitely field day season for us. And so how are we going to make them all virtual? Could we? So primarily we've been focusing on field days, but we also have had, we had a couple of a series of more casual meetups with beginning farmers that had to be transitioned to an online format. And then we also had a pop-up ongoing meeting. We called it Strategies for Strange Times. And it was for mostly direct to market farmers in the membership who it was a once every Friday, they would get on and chat about, experiences with dealing with the pandemic, especially early on when they didn't know what was going to happen with farmers markets being available and the huge increase in interest in like direct meat sales with consumers. So, the field days are our biggest events we've transitioned. And then along the way, there's just been these other pop-up events that we figured out how to do online as well. And they're usually just Zoom meetings in those cases.
That's great. And who's your main audience that you're trying to reach with these virtual events?
So because our membership is, because we're farmer led and our membership is really diverse, we have a really wide range of ag audience members. So our farmers range anywhere from a couple of acres to hundreds of acres. There's a lot of fruit and veggie farmers, but also livestock farmers and row crop farmers. And then our audience usually hits some partnering organizations too, and then friends of farmers, so people that are just generally interested in agriculture. So it's a pretty broad spectrum of people that we're trying to reach when we put these events on.
Yeah, definitely. And have you noticed or learned about the benefits of hosting events virtually other than just the health and safety precautions?
Yeah, I think that, so all of our virtual field days, we've mostly done live on Facebook. We still use Zoom in the background as like our foundation platform, but then it gets broadcast to Facebook. And we've seen that broadcasting to Facebook, we're reaching newer audiences. So people that just didn't know who we were. And Facebook is such an ingrained part of so many people's daily routines that there's more of a chance that they'll stumble upon our events when they're being shared by lots of our members online. So we've had a new audience. And then the other thing that's a benefit, I would say, is we just finished up our 2020 membership survey, and some of the comments that kept popping up for people were they really like videos and online events because of time constraints and, maybe geography constraints. And so inadvertently putting all of this material online for the virtual field days is actually like hitting on some of the wants and needs of our membership too. So that's kind of been a silver lining along the way, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. What should be the first step when groups are thinking about hosting an event virtually?
So I'm gonna share a link to some training materials, because what I'm about to talk about, I actually went into a lot more depth in a SARE training that I did. So the link that I just put in the chat box, it actually has 2 different trainings in it. One was targeted at more education and conservation organizations or educators in general. And that got into the nitty gritty of what we do at PFI in order to hook Zoom up to Facebook to do these live events. And then the other training, which is titled 18th June Virtual Field Day Training, was targeted to farmers and ranchers. So most of, who's in the audience right now. And that outlines in more detail what my recommendations would be in the short time we have here, which is, first you want to figure out what your goals are, right? So what kind of interaction do you want to have with your audience? And then what kind of content do you want to share? Because your content, there's some content that works really well, just audio, and then there's other content that you really need video for. So determine what is your content sharing goal and what sort of format do you need in order to get the point and your message across. And then what kind of interaction do you want to have with your audience? Do you want it to be really conversational where everybody's generating some ideas and it's more casual and conversational, or do you want it to be more of a one-way where you've prepared everything in advance and then you're just going to disseminate your experience and knowledge to share with the general audience? So just stepping back and thinking about all those 2 things first is really important. And then the second really important thing are your resources, right? So for us, we've got a lot of members that run into internet issues. And I think that that's, a fair assumption to say that a lot of people on the call today also might run into connectivity. And if your goal is to stream video or to be live, but you're someplace where the internet's not gonna hold up to the bandwidth requirements, then you might have to think of an alternative. The other thing is, even if you think, or if you have the resources available, who's your audience going to be? Are they going to have connection issues? So just thinking about your internet connectivity and what limitations that might have on what type of an event you can hold. And then another piece of your resources are technical assistance. So do you have, and this could be like a family member or a friend, or if you work really closely with a partnering organization, do they have some resources, technical know-how to help you out to put together those events? So, even we had a couple of field days where a granddaughter was helping her grandfather. She was the camera person the entire time, even having a camera person available, even if you're not going live, is super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So Maggie, you kind of touched on a few of the different platforms like Zoom and Facebook Live. Can you just give maybe a brief overview of what the benefits of some of the different ones? I know there's also YouTube or Twitter, things like that. Can you just give a brief overview of each of the ones you've used and how to select what would be best?
So at PFI, we have only been using Zoom and Facebook for our events. And this is where I'm gonna share my screen really quick. So this is a slide that's in the presentation I mentioned earlier. So this is slides 12 and 13. And I got online and I found, sort of the top platforms that were showing up for what people have been using in this virtual world we exist in now. And I tried to organize it so that you got your platform name and then what type of interaction you would have with your audience here. So is it that you're going to interact over video, audio, and text would be something like there's a chat box included like today. If you want to share some PowerPoint slides or some pre-recorded video, then the screen share is really important. So I've got that included in this column. And then what your max capacity is, so ahead of time if the expected audience would fit within the free version of all these technologies. So like I only put down the free version thresholds and parameters on these tables. And then what the time limit is for each of them and how you can join. So whether you can be on your mobile phone to join as an audience member, or if you have to be at your computer, if you can call in by phone. And then if your audience member needs an account in order to log on. So I put all this information in these tables, and I think that, it's hard to say. There's so many costs or not like costs and benefits, but like advantages and disadvantages of each of them, that it goes back to what I was saying earlier about what are your goals? Like what kind of interaction do you want to have? How long do you want to be online with folks? What type of content are you sharing? And then once you figure that part out, you can start looking at some of these options, and hopefully some will, it'll become clear that it's a good fit for you or not. And like I said, these are all, if you have a free account on any of these platforms, that's what you would expect to run into for these fields that I've included. But if you have a partner organization that would allow you to use their Zoom account, for instance, to hold a webinar, then, that expands your opportunities even further. So I'll stop sharing this, but this is in the PowerPoint slide that I shared the link.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So Maggie, if I'm getting ready, I'm standing out in my field, getting ready to go live, can you share some important things to remember, tips for right before you begin?
So even before that, practice. Well, even before you practice, build your agenda, right? So determine what your goals are, and then put together your agenda, what you want to talk about, kind of how long you're going to talk about it. If you're going to be walking around on your farm, like where do you need to be on your farm to talk about each of those things? And maybe do you have props that you want to have available to showcase as you move around your farm? So build your agenda and figure out what you want the event to look like, and then practice it. So just do a dry run, maybe walking through it once, using your agenda as a guideline, but then do a tech test. And that's something that I talk about in length in the PowerPoint that I shared too. So a tech test is when you kind of go online live and see if everything works the way it's supposed to, so that you become more comfortable with the platform, and you have an opportunity to work through all those kinks that, like, you're gonna run into issues. And we still run into issues at PFI. There's always something unexpected that pops up, and your audience understands that, so don't worry about it. Like, you'll be fine. Everyone has small snafus, but build your agenda and then practice. And that'll prepare you for when you get to the point that you are gonna go live, and then you can have more fun and you'll be more relaxed.
Yeah, definitely. We did have a question come in, Maggie. Someone wants to know if you've ever tried Microsoft Teams and how that worked for you.
We haven't used our PFI doesn't use Microsoft Teams. I think I was invited to one Microsoft Teams meeting once, and I don't have the app on my computer, so I had to log in through the browser version of Microsoft Teams, and it was really clunky. For somebody that didn't have an account, I did not like using it. So that's my only experience, and maybe that's not a fair estimate of the capabilities of Microsoft Teams, but that was what happened when I got on.
Great. Yeah, good to know. Is there a way to tech test on Facebook Live that doesn't actually post the test?
Yeah, well, no. We created a testing page. So we just made a testing 1, 2, 3 page that's anonymous, and no one knows it really exists except for the people that I've told in these trainings. And that's what we practice going live onto, so that we can get the full effect of what it's like. I know I was talking to an organization last week, and they have a Facebook page that they use just internally for their staff to do some planning and sharing. And that's what they would tech test to, because it was internal, so it didn't matter who ended up seeing it. It was, subscribe to that page.
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially if you're out in a field and not exactly sure what your internet will be like. So yeah, that's a really good idea. I haven't heard that before. You had mentioned earlier also to have like family members or people there kind of as tech support. Can you explain how many people you recommend having there and what exactly their roles should be as you're going live or doing some of these virtual things?
I think it ends up going back to whatever platform you're going to use and whatever your vision is for your event. If you decide that you just don't have the capacity to do video streaming and sharing video, then maybe you end up just putting together a podcast, and you don't need anybody on hand to share that podcast. Maybe in the process of putting it together, you'll have a partnering organization or a friend that's a little more tech savvy, like help edit the audio and help you put it together. But once you go live, you don't need any assistance. It's once you start doing events that are a little more complex, and like what we do at PFI, then it's really helpful to have somebody be the tech staff who's making sure that Zoom and Facebook are linking up correctly, and then maybe have another staff member who we call the lead staff. They're the public-facing staff member at PFI, so they're the ones that are, welcoming the audience and introducing the topic for the day and who the farmers are, and then you have the speakers themselves. So in all of our field days, there's at least 3 people involved, 2 PFI staff, and then a farmer or 2. So it depends. There's definitely versions where you don't need that much technical assistance, but if you want to like do something similar, like reach out to partnering orgs and see how they can help you.
Yeah. Do you have any tips to share to keep your audience active and attentive during events, maybe both live and via like webinars?
So preparing ahead of time, I think, is the biggest one, right? Because you want to be like as polished as you can be ahead of time so that you're engaging to listen to or to watch. You also don't want to run into technical issues that were totally unforeseen ahead of time that you would have figured out if you had done your tech test. So practice ahead of time, and that's already going to set you like steps ahead of others that are putting on events. Besides that, try and just keep it conversational and interact with your audience as much as possible. So try to, engage through chat boxes, or if people can, in a meeting format, like if they can turn their mics on and ask questions throughout. That's really nice with the live events where where the farmer is on site and like somebody can ask a question and they can pivot and like go back to that piece of equipment that they wanted to look at and look at like, something that wouldn't have been captured maybe in a pre-recorded video. So just try and keep it engaging and also short, right? Like no one wants to be online for 2 hours. So the shorter you can condense your content, the better. Everyone likes this type of thing in more bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, definitely. All very good tips. We have another question in the chat. From your experience, are live events better attended than pre-recorded materials?
So that's something that I should have talked about a little bit too. You can do a hybrid as well. All of our events that we've done this field day season are live, but we've had events that are broadcast live and incorporate pre-recorded material, which isn't really getting at your question, this person's question, but just realize too that you can be live and walking around a little bit, maybe in an area where you are confident that you have connectivity, and then you can share pre-recorded video from a place on your farm that doesn't have connectivity, or the the event that occurred. So like maybe you wanted to share video of a harvest that happened 2 weeks in advance or 2 weeks ago. You can incorporate that pre-recorded video into the live event.
Yeah, great. If there's any, we could take maybe 1 or 2 more questions for Maggie. If anyone has them, you can type them in the chat box now.
And then the other thing that I wanted to share within that SARE training resources Google folder, the slides that I was screen sharing, I recorded that presentation. So if you want more in-depth commentary on the actual slides, you can watch the YouTube video of that.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. We do have another question. Do most attendees to your events have the technology to communicate with the discussion online?
So Facebook is easy. You just have to have you don't have to have a Facebook account to watch, but you have to have a Facebook account in order to comment. And that's really easy to, pop questions into the comment box. We've been using the webinar format of Zoom, and there's a chat box in the webinar format, and you're able to open people's mics up if they raise their hand and indicate that they want to talk. So I think that staff have used that to a minimal degree. There's still not as much conversation happening in our events as I wish there would be. And I don't know if that's because we just haven't figured out how to facilitate that better, or if people are also a little microphone shy. They just would rather put their questions in the text box rather than, opening the mic and doing it audibly.
Yeah, great. I have one last question. What have you found the best ways are to promote virtual or live events to attract an audience?
So we put all of our events through our normal channels, right? Like sharing it on our email listservs and putting it out in our weekly P-News email newsletters. And then Facebook has just been really helpful to advertise on Facebook, and people end up sharing it, and that's how it ends up reaching wider audience that we wouldn't connect to otherwise. So Facebook has been really helpful in this virtual event world.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Maggie. And I'm not sure if you want to share maybe your contact info in the chat. I know there's some resources there too. Otherwise, this webinar is being recorded, so if there's things you want to refer back to later, we will be sharing that as well. So thanks, Maggie. And now we're gonna jump on over to Josh Kamps. He is the Division of Extension Ag Educator in Lafayette County, and he's also a member of the producer-led group, the Lafayette Ag Stewardship Alliance. And they recently hosted a unique drive-by field day that he's gonna share a little bit about as an alternative way to host an event. So take it away, Josh.
All right, thank you, Erica. And everyone should see one of the shots from our field day. If not, somebody, let me know, please. But very good introduction, Maggie, to this whole concept, right, of communicating through different means. I'm going to be kind of the boring one in the middle, I guess. I'm not that comfortable yet with these sorts of communications. So as part of the LASA group, as a farmer initially, and then once I joined Extension as an educator in late 2018, some of the hands-on things have been the best for our farmers, and I know that's what we're not able to do quite as easily. But this was a concept that we came up with to give some of that hands-on touch, but also keep that safe COVID distance. And we called it a drive-through field day. So I'm just going to go through just a few pictures and slides here to back this up some. So this is part of a research trial, the spring seeded cover crop trial. There's 2 different fields in Lafayette County. Lots of words on the screen there, but just kind of the basics are these cover crops are planted in mid-March and then allowed to grow until June after the grain crop was already growing, and then we terminated them at that point. So just kind of taking a look at that technology. This information then was made available for all attendees that wanted to, join in the drive-through field day. You can see it's my right-hand side of the screen there, the plot layout. So this was set up, and I'm going to use my mouse here. Maybe it'll work. So there's a major highway in Lafayette County, which runs right here, okay? And then there was a field driveway to a windmill, to a wind turbine station here. So having that location was what really worked good for our event. The farmers were able to pull in and then look down the rows of all these different plots, all right, and then make a loop, and they could head back out. So kind of giving that chance for the farmers to get off their farm and do a little bit of crop scouting in their pickup trucks. This part of the drive-through field day, I was not able to get ready in time. So the time sensitivity of the termination of that spring cover crop really made things happen quick, and getting it scheduled and such before it was terminated. But this is the concept that I think would definitely work. Don't let me know, I guess, if you try it out yourself. I'm planning on working in it some more myself, but it's this drive-through movie theater type technology, I guess I'll call it. So you're able to, with this broadcast transmitter, speak to, have a little discussion, I guess, a one-way discussion with the farmers as they drive through, just right to the radio on their pickup trucks. And depending on what type of range you might want, these technologies need to be used very carefully, so we don't interfere with the other radio frequencies and such that are already being used in the area. But definitely for, maybe like a 1 mile range, either of these types would definitely work for that. So with that in mind, we weren't able to utilize that for this field day, but these are just some snapshots of the day of the field day. So this is basically right at termination, the growing cover crop, and then this is set up in replicated research plots. We'll be able to take this all the way to yield and get information there as well. And the handout was made available with some back information on just all the specifics of establishment timing and the amount of seed that we use for different plots. This one up here on the far right, this is a spring oats and radish. So that had just a little bit different growth type than the cereal rye did. Just pull up here it is there, the one I was speaking of. And these are set up these are 16 row plots. So a 20-foot drill came down and went back, and then a 16-row corn planter covered the same space. So that's kind of the layout of this plot for size. These were the cover crops at the day of the field day. So we made some of these. We made some of these available, so farmers can see what's going on below the ground as well. So just a really good opportunity to get a visual, at a space and time, that was pretty necessary for them to drive by it and see it. A few of the other cover crops here, pictures of those in the root development. And final one right there. And then just a couple of pictures that I included after the fact, right? Just for a little bit of a view of kind of how the plot is growing at the moment. And that's corn at this timing here. So roughly 2 weeks after termination. And then this is the shot of the biomass. So what we were trying to take a look at is, can we get something growing to cover that soil in that vulnerable time frame of April, May, and June? And then that's my last slide. So I guess any questions, and hopefully Erica can redirect our conversation some. I would like to answer whatever questions that people might have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Josh. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I have a few questions, Josh. So what was your original plan for these plots before the coronavirus pandemic happened? Or what were your plans for this summer to utilize them, or how are you going to show them?
Okay, good, thanks. So this was a project that was set up through Lafayette County Land Conservation, and the Land Conservation Committee wanted to see, what's the effect of spring seeded cover crops. We've had a couple of falls where it's been difficult to get the cover crops planted. So what could we expect for spring seeded cover crops? That's where this started. And then with my extension interests, I connected that research component to it so that we can replicate it and really try to see where this planting style might fit.
Yeah.
So really it was a research based plot study, but we needed an opportunity for farmers to get out and practice some social distancing, and it worked.
Yeah. So we have a question about I think when you talked about getting it broadcasted on the radio, did you look into any licensing that you would need to get for the FM transmitter with the FCC?
Yep. So the little bit that I looked into it, you've got to stay very local, and you've got to use a frequency that's not being used in that area. If you're going to go outside of those bounds, then you definitely are going to have to look at the way to do it legally. But this is very small scale. I'm not promoting it, but that's what I understand of it. So great question, though.
Yeah. And then did you use any signage at each site to explain what the plots contained?
Yep, great question. Thank you. So every plot was staked with what the farmer was seeing, whether it was we actually had a replication of no cover crop as well. So they were listed up through the plot, and then corresponding back to the handout that they had to be able to kind of go back and forth.
Great. Yeah, we have lots of questions coming in, so this is good. Were you present at the drive-by, Josh? And what was the turnout like? And did you get a lot of questions at the time, or did you discuss on a call later?
Okay, great. So I was present, very distanced, right? We had a lot of information up and on the handouts and such about how to be safe and how to practice our best social distancing and such. So I was present just to kind of get an idea on the flow of people through. We had it open for 3 hours, and it was pretty steady traffic. It didn't have like a time, when people could come or couldn't come. The group and myself and land conservation, we just wanted to see how it would work. And with having that good access to the field, the in and out was pretty smooth.
Yeah. What was the turnout like?
Okay, yeah. So over those 3 hours, we had roughly 30 farmers that came. And it was tricky, we hit first crop harvest, and that took away a few farmers that wanted to come. So they simply came a couple of days later and kind of did the plot on their own.
Yeah. And then did you take questions that day, or did you get phone calls later to talk about any questions as people drove by?
Well, I had a few important questions, like they were wondering where the free lunch was. That was one important part of field days that I haven't been able to quite broadcast yet. But I think that this was a new enough type concept that the farmers just needed a chance for it to settle. And we've talked about it since at some land conservation meetings. So I think the word is out and people are thinking, but no direct question and answer that day.
Okay. And how did you promote this drive-by event?
Okay, so working with LASA, they've got some capacity for promotion through email blasts and such, promoted on our county website. And it was a quick turnaround. Definitely I was paying attention to some of Maggie's ideas for promotion, because I think that's one of the bigger pieces of this.
Yeah. One question, did participants have the option to text you questions?
Ooh, good idea. I did not share that, but through this experience, you know, my cell phone number is, I don't know that I was keeping it private anyway, but it's just been so much easier to share that when farmers are calling into the office and such. So I really like that idea.
Yeah. And then I see Mike Travis shared some information from the fcc.gov. I'll just read through it quick. He said, unlicensed operation on the AM and FM radio broadcast bands is permitted for some extremely low-powered devices covered under Part 15 of the FCC's rules. On FM frequencies, these devices are limited to effective service range of approximately 200 feet or 61 meters. So some good info there. Thanks for sharing, Mike.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great idea. I've definitely driven through like some Christmas lights where you tune into a radio station and it syncs with the music. So it's definitely seems like could be something to figure out and would be worthwhile, especially if they were going to be future drive-bys. Do you think you'll set up another one of these as later in the season for people to check back in?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. And definitely these are some great suggestions today that I can add into the next event.
Yeah. Heidi said you could set up a conference call number that people could call into so you don't need to broadcast. So that's a good idea too. Great. Thanks for sharing, everyone.
Right. To not need access to the internet connection.
Yes. Yeah. Great.
Cool.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing, Josh.
You're welcome.
Got
Thank
a
you.
lot of great questions. I think we're going to move on now to Whitney Prestby. She's with the Natural Resources Institute, part of the Division of Extension, and she's going to talk about some tips and tricks for taking photos and videos.
All right, thanks, Erica. So as Erica mentioned, I'm a natural resource educator with UW-Madison Division of Extension. I'm the outreach specialist for the Fox demo farms and the Kewaunee demo farms. So over the past few years, we have been building a pretty extensive library of videos demonstrating the work that's being done on the farms in our watersheds. And so today's topic is timely because of our inability to gather in large groups, but I think we've learning that farmers, one of the best ways to communicate, one of the most popular ways for them to consume information is through videos. So pandemic or no pandemic, having videos as part of your outreach plan is a really important tool. And so today I'm going to be going through the document that you should have received with the latest email from Erica on today's webinar. So if you don't have it pulled up, I'm going to be walking through that. If you aren't able to access your email right now, it should be in your email. So when you do get to your computer, you can pull that up. So yeah, I'm going to walk through some of the major points in that document, and then I'm going to be demonstrating using a video to kind of showcase what I'm talking about. So the first thing that's really important is having your phone orientation on the horizontal. So holding your phone horizontally versus vertically. This might not seem like something that's really important when you're actually taking the videos or the pictures, but when you go to editing, having that landscape perspective is really important to capture that whole story and that whole image of what you're showing. So if there's one thing that you take away from my talk today, hopefully that's it, that you will take all of your videos and your photos in the horizontal landscape, because that's really, really important. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see here, make sure the audio's on. All right, so the next two things on the handout that I shared are interviews and B-roll. So B-roll is basically the background action shots that you are going to be collecting that help tell the story. And then the interviews are obviously the content, what you're, why you're out in that field doing this video. So one of the most important things to keep in mind is that you need to be short and keep the interviews short and get to the point really quickly. Videos really should not be longer than 3 minutes. 3 minutes are kind of pushing it. It might seem unusual since we're living in a culture where people can binge watch Netflix for days. But when it comes to scrolling through your videos on Facebook or any other social media platform, people's attention span is really not that long. So if you can get the information and the content out in about a minute or two, that's probably the best, no more than 3 minutes.
Hey, Whitney, are we
Yes.
looking at something yet?
Yeah, I'm about to start this video here. So you able to see that? Okay, perfect. So this video here was shot on my cell phone. I'm just going to be pausing here to kind of talk through some key points. So branding is really important. You want to make sure that people get used to seeing your group, your logo associated with the content that you're putting out. So branding is important. The background music that you're hearing on this video, this is all free music that I shared in this document. YouTube has an audio library. All of the music on there is free to access. So that's a good way to get some little background music that you can pick from. Yeah, I'm going to talk about interviews for a second. We're going to Gary and Nick Gillett in their interview here.
So we're out here today at Deer Run Dairy. They are actively taking off corn silage here. And we're standing in a field here that was no-till planted green actually.
All right, so a couple of things. When I do a video, I like to make sure that the interviews happen first. So before I go and get the background shots, the B-roll, I'd like to have the interviews done first. This just helps me get an understanding of where we're going to be going with the video, making sure that we are hitting the points that we want to, and then that helps guide how you're going to do the rest of the video. What kind of action shots do you need? So a couple of important things with the interviews. If you noticed in the background, that was kind of a windy day. That's why we were in the cornfield, using the corn as kind of a wind block. You can also use tree lines. Sometimes you have to use like your truck, strategically placing the truck so that you can have a little bit of a break in the wind. Investing in like a lapel wireless microphone is helpful. They're not that expensive, maybe $50 to $100 or so, depending on which one you get. So if you have the funds to do that, I would suggest doing that. This video, we didn't have our microphone out there, so it's not necessary, but it does help. And there's certain days where it's just really, really windy. And so if the situation arises and you can't reschedule because they're out there planting or they're harvesting, just get your video, your B-roll, and do the audio part of it in a truck or an office, and you can always just pull the audio out and then overlay it onto your B-roll. But you really want to make sure that you're able to hear the person and not having a lot of background wind noise. So that's really important. The other thing that I want to mention before we move on to this video, further into this video, having still frames, still shots is also nice to incorporate. So it doesn't have to all be video. So this right here that you're seeing is a still shot. And then another important thing to kind of, as you get more comfortable with videos and thinking through this as part of a larger outreach strategy, start thinking about the whole story. So it's very rare that you go out to a field and you are going to shoot a video and the only thing you're talking about is that day at that field. Usually there's a whole backstory. There's the planting process. There's the cover crops that were planted the previous year. It was the termination of the cover crop in the spring, or you name it. There's a million other things that go into getting to the point that you are at for that day. So if you are working with a group, if you're a farmer, if you're working with farmers, taking pictures periodically throughout the season is really important because it helps to just really bring that whole story together when you actually go in and then make a video about that particular field. I also like to add text to highlight specific things. So if it's a date, like in this example, maybe it's a planting rate or a seed mix that you use, anything that is really, you think, really important for the audience to pick up on, it's nice to have that text there so that they see it, they hear it, and it maybe will stick a little bit better into their brain. So
into rye this spring that was over knee high. So yeah, this is the soil surface out here on Deer Run, and You know, there's no evidence of the rye from the spring when we planted green.
So again, this is just paying attention to that interview. What are the things that the interview is talking about, so that you can go back and then get that B-roll, get them looking at the soil structure. That's all part of the process and kind of thinking through what that video is going to look like and what you're going to need to make that video. Scroll a little bit, jump ahead here to Nick's portion.
Using dump carts, but this is a field that can
Obviously,
remain in no-till
being
and
able
not
to
have
have some action shots where you've got equipment out there really makes the video appealing to farmers. So if you can make it work where you are out there on a day where they're harvesting or planting or spreading manure, and just getting that visual part of it is really important. So I think I'm going to jump now to, I'll stop sharing my screen. So now you might be thinking, okay, yeah, I can take a picture, take videos on my phone, but what do I do with it then? I don't have a lot of time to go into the details of editing, but I do want to just let you know that this is not, I'm not doing this on a real fancy, expensive software system. This is all free. I have a Mac, so I use iMovies, but if you're a Windows user, Microsoft Video Maker is a free software. I just suggest that you take, you know, a few hours, afternoon someday to play around with it. Look at, watch how-to videos on YouTube and just play around, practicing. A lot of it, once you get used to the different functions, it's pretty self-explanatory and intuitive, but it does take a little practice just to get comfortable with it. But there's definitely free software out there. It's not a big expenditure. And then lastly, if you're going to go through all of this, you're going to go get the video, you're going to take time to edit it, you want to be able to share it and get it out to your audiences. So for us, with the demo farms, we have pretty active Facebook pages, so that's where we predominantly put our videos on. So I did include a couple of pointers on how to share the videos to make sure that you're maximizing the reach and the engagement with your audiences. So with Facebook, it's really important that you upload the video itself. So it'd be like same as you upload pictures, you upload the video right to Facebook. The reason being, like I said, when people are scrolling through Facebook, they're getting bombarded with, you know, the million other things that exist on Facebook. So what Facebook will do is if you upload it directly to Facebook, it'll automatically start. And so when they're scrolling through, instead of having a static thumbnail like you would if you posted a YouTube link, it will start to play. And so that'll get your audience to potentially stop and actually watch your video if that starts to autoplay. So that's important. Tagging people who are involved in it. So if the farm that you're at has a Facebook page, tag them, tag any other partners. That just helps get the reach expand on your audience. And then boosting is super important. So I boost every post that I make on our Facebook pages. Doesn't have to be really expensive, you know, $5-10 per post, but it makes a big difference. It really helps keep your content relevant. So I really encourage that. Twitter, we don't do a lot with Twitter. It does have I just threw in there that it does have a time limit on the videos that you can post on there. And then lastly, YouTube. So we do have channels for the demo farms. This is more, I kind of think of it as like our library where we store our videos, which is really good if you're going to be sending out to like a listserv or emailing people the videos, because they're big files. You usually can't attach it as an attachment, but you can share it as the link. So I don't really think of YouTube as like the high traffic area, but it's a good storage. So I think with that, I'm about at my time. So if there are any questions.
We do have 2 questions for you. The first one, one was about software, which I think you answered. And then how long does it take on average to complete one of your videos and have it ready to be shared?
That's a good question. And it really varies on the video. If I'm the one who goes out and is able to do the interview and do the whole process, I think when I get back to my computer, I can probably put something out in an hour tops. If you are relying on someone else to get the video for you, sometimes it takes a little bit more tweaking, because then you have to, because you're not there to get all that that B-roll or do the interview yourself. So sometimes that will take a little bit longer. But once you get the hang of it, it's pretty quick to turn around. But again, it's just, depending on the situation.
Yeah. We're getting close to time, so I'm just going to launch this quick poll. If you're still listening, please fill it out. But one last question for you, Whitney. What exactly is boosting on a Facebook post? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so boosting, let me see if I've got a screen grab here. So we'll share this picture. This is a screenshot of a boost. So whenever you post something from a page that you might run, you'll see that Facebook asks you if you want to boost it. So it's basically asking you if you want to create an ad for your post. And so what you can see here is that you can select, it's nice because you can select your demographics. So you can pick like, okay, I want to boost this in Wisconsin. And then you can say like, I want to make sure that it's reaching people who maybe in their profile have demonstrated or they follow a lot of dairy or farmer or water quality or whatever it might be, whatever that topic or interest that you're looking for in that particular audience. So it allows you to kind of really take a targeted approach to your promotions, and then it runs the ads. So basically it keeps the post relevant on someone's Facebook page. So instead of posting something, at noon on a Tuesday, if people aren't really looking at their Facebook or they scroll past it once, they might not ever see it again. But with boosting, it keeps it relevant, and you can select. So usually, if I do $1 a day, maybe $1.50 a day, depending on, how exciting I think the video is or that content is or whatever I'm promoting. And so it has to be at least $1 a day to promote it, but you can run it for as many days as you want. And like I said, it really does help people see your content and doesn't get lost in their feeds. It keeps it relevant for them. So definitely worth the investment.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Whitney. So with that, I think we're getting close to 1 o'clock. So I'm going to stop the recording and thank Whitney, Josh, and Maggie very much for participating and sharing their knowledge with us today. We will hang out on here for a little bit. If anyone has any last thoughts or wants to share creative ideas that they've had about events or any events that they've hosted recently that are in an alternative format, we'll stay on for a little bit and would love to hear what you all have to say. I will be sending out a survey this afternoon in your email, so also watch for that. So thanks, everyone.